What's going on, everyone? It's the Home Slice Ascend Hyperion, and today we're going to be talking about one of the most recognizable maps in Halo, Blood Gulch. Over Halo's almost 20-year history, each new title has introduced about a dozen or so new maps to be played on. But as a franchise, Halo has had a long history of carrying over maps between titles, usually directly between sequels or just as extra content in later games. Easy examples include Halo CE's Beaver Creek and Halo 2's Lockout and Sanctuary. But no map in Halo's lifespan has seen so many repeats as Blood Gulch. The map has appeared in nearly its original form in 4 Halo titles, and in spirit as Valhalla in 3 others. It even appeared in Halo Wars. Basically, Blood Gulch, or a direct descendant of it, has appeared in every mainline Halo title, and then some. Or has it? It's no secret that Valhalla is touted as inspired by Gulch, but is this really true? Upon inspection alone, the two maps have fairly stark differences, and when we examine gameplay, the divide between them grows even further. And in the past 3 consecutive Halo titles, Gulch in its true form has been left out in favor for Valhalla. But why? If Blood Gulch is supposed to be one of the most iconic maps in all of Halo, why has it been phased out so thoroughly in favor of Valhalla's design? Well, it's because Valhalla isn't actually a true descendant of Blood Gulch, and in this video we'll explore not only why not, but we'll also talk about why Blood Gulch may never appear in a future Halo title again. Let's get started. First, I think it's important we establish an understanding of Blood Gulch from a design perspective, rather than just the backdrop of red versus blue.
You ever wonder why we're here? It's one of life's great mysteries, isn't it?
Using layman forger's terms, we would define Gulch as a wide box canyon with a strong 2-base and very loose 2-tower layout. I imagine a few people have raised eyebrows about the 2-tower assertion, so let me explain. Gulch and its direct descendants all feature 2 primary neutral points of considerable elevation, and unlike the rest of the map, the loose towers feature elements of hard cover and teleportation outlets for the main bases. So while neither loose tower has much hard geometry, they still act as conduits for movement and engagements. In fact, this is very important. Thanks to the teleporters and viability of the loose towers for cover and movement, the overall map flow on Gulch is actually fairly cyclical. Players funnel out from the bases and skirt along the towers, which is usually where the majority of the fighting happens on foot until collapse, and then movement cycles to the opposite base and then back again. The other really important thing is that Blood Gulch is open. In fact, the map features basically no hard routes or hard cover, especially outside the range of the bases and loose towers. Instead, Gulch relies heavily on changes in elevation of the terrain to cut off player sight lines. These elevations flow in nearly equal waves and form between the bases. But probably most importantly, Gulch also relies on both weapons and players to underperform at range in order to force fighting closer together. So to say, in the games where Gulch appears, the weapons have levels of spread and drop off that put an effective cap on the range at which it can make sense to use. We'll talk about why this is a terrible idea later. Boom, okay, you're all experts in Blood Gulch, congrats. Now it's time we talk about Valhalla. Valhalla has long been touted as the successor to Blood Gulch, originally often being called Halo 3's Blood Gulch. Whether it was purely for marketing or a firm belief is unknown to me, and I'd be lying if I said the two didn't have similarities, but they also have differences. And we're gonna talk about both of those. So remember like 40 seconds ago when we talked about all that nerdy Blood Gulch stuff? Let's take everything we learned there and apply it to Valhalla. First, the 2-base, 2-loose tower requisite. Valhalla actually almost hits the mark, but it misses it just a little bit and in just the right way. Remember that we talked about those neutral sides and how they're equally appealing for combat and travel? Well, Valhalla's neutral sides are a bit lopsided. as high densities of both elevation and cover are placed on the map's west loose tower, while the east loose tower is far more exposed and actually sits at a much lower elevation, further weakening its viability for general travel. All in all though, the two loose towers alone aren't that much different from Gulch's, but what furthers the disparity between them is, well, what's between them. One of Valhalla's most prominent features and biggest difference from Blood Gulch is at the very center of the map. The bases are separated by a massive hill formation, sitting at a higher elevation than the bases. Recall that we noted Blood Gulch uses waves of fairly equal elevation changes at its core, and in fact the map reserves its most highest elevations for the outer routes. Remember that cyclical movement? Well, on Valhalla, the elevation changes are much more extreme, one, and they're no longer distributed in wave pattern from the bases. The number of elevation changes over distance is also cut way down. As the map features fewer and far more dramatic changes, this allows the gameplay to function cyclically like before, but also makes linear travel far more viable. Especially with the aid of the base grav lifts, getting to mid on foot is far faster and less risky than on Gulch. This seemingly small series of changes actually cut Valhalla off from Blood Gulch in a massive way. You see, Gulch isn't really that complex a map, and when you start to chop away from it, you change its elements, and those changes happen very quickly. I won't deny that Valhalla makes nods to Gulch, but I think to call it a true Gulch map is a far reach, and it kinda rests more on the fringe of saying inspired by at best. I mean, given my personal opinion, even to say it's inspired by is to imply too much similarity between the two. It's almost misleading. So we've established that Valhalla falls short of delivering the same gameplay experience as Gulch. And why? Now we'll talk about why Valhalla's design has been the go-to for the past 3 consecutive Halo titles. If you've been enjoying the video, be sure to tap that subscribe button. Alright. Now we're all pretty big-brained. We've broken down one of the oldest and most simple maps in Halo and finally proven that its son is illegitimate. So the next question is, why did Valhalla rise to prominence over Gulch? What makes it the more viable option for modern titles? Well, we technically already answered that question. It deals with not just the map, but the weapon sandboxes. Gulch relies very heavily, and I mean like full crutch, on the limitation of players and weapons. Like we said, the outer rims have a constant looming potential for cross-mapping. That's because of their elevation, like we mentioned. However, since the player cannot rely on their weapon to cover that cross-map distance, they're forced to seek a distance that does, remedying the basic map-breaking issue. In titles like Halo 4 and Halo 5, the ability of ranged weapons to perform reliably at range increased sharply, as the mechanics of the sandbox changed. Gameplay just wouldn't have been the same on these titles, as the core movement design, cyclical motion, caused by lack of engagement range would have been heavily impeded. Now, curious enough, the game that introduced Valhalla, Halo 3, didn't have this problem. It featured notable levels of spread and drop off actually, so why the change? Well, Halo 3 it functions the opposite direction. Halo 3's ranged weapon meta was boiled down very thinly to just basically the BR, and the Halo 3 BR featured higher levels of spread and fall off than its sister, the Halo 2 BR, and we can even talk about something as minute as the lack of feedback with firing. That could be its own video topic if I'm being honest. Valhalla actually allows for closer, more frequent engagements between players on foot, which rests in line with the reduction in fight distance so common in Halo 3. But wait. Basically, all the reasons we've listed for the usage of Valhalla as opposed to Gulch deal most directly with the weapon sandbox and general gameplay of the corresponding title. For reasons mostly linked to each title, Valhalla was just a better option from a gameplay perspective. It was just more flexible in its design and, most importantly, less affected by changes in the sandbox when compared to Blood Gulch. Gulch's dependence on limits of players and guns puts it in a position to not be viable from a gameplay perspective if conditions revolving around gameplay change. I think H2A's Blood Gulch is a good example of this in action. H2A's BR is an absolute monster, performing very well at range with very little notable spread. As such, H2A's Gulch suffers as it struggles to maintain the core elements of that cyclical gameplay we mentioned. I didn't even mention how it puts a strangle on the vehicle gameplay. Man, that could be its own video topic. So I think it's fair to say that what's kept Gulch out of the last 3 consecutive titles has much to do with the map itself, as it does the sandbox of the corresponding game. The two are fundamentally linked, and that's dangerous. So what does this mean for the future of one of Halo's oldest and most iconic maps? Well, it's unclear. Since Gulch depends heavily on ranged weapons to underperform at a certain distance, if Halo Infinite's weapons perform above that mark, it may not return to matchmaking. It will likely be replaced again by a map that's either more versatile or just more suited for the sandbox. But there's hope. Thanks to the power of Forge in Halo 5, Blood Gulch had gotten to return in many forms, both original and reimagined. One of the most notable being Duquesne 23's basic spot-on remake of Hemorrhage within his remake of the entirety of Forge World. If Halo Infinite rolls out and Gulch isn't in matchmaking, you can count on Forgers to rebuild it within days, maybe hours even, and it will live on. So, in a way, Gulch will never really be gone, and it'll always remain Halo's most transitive map across all these years. The goal of this video was to get you thinking about design and gameplay in a way maybe you haven't before. Gulch isn't the only map to rely heavily on conditions of the sandbox. Many others have and do. Can you think of any? Let me know your thoughts below in the comments. The best way to support me is to like, subscribe, but most importantly, share this video with others. Gaining traction starts with you, and for that I say, thank you. That's it for this video. Until next time, I'll catch you guys later.